Hey, hello, parents. I'm Erica Desper, founder of the Confident Parenting Collective, and I'm back with another expert guest and an informative, digestible video that you can watch in your spare time. Haha. We'll keep it short, we'll keep it sweet. With me today is Nicole Rouleau. Thank you for joining me. Her business is Igniting Your Mind. She's a learning specialist who specializes in executive function from a neuroscience perspective. And today we're going to share some tips for managing meltdowns. How are you, Nicole?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Yes, I always love to have you. I know we were just chatting before we hit record. We have so much we want to share and get across to parents, but keep this focused and we'll be back with more. So for parents that are struggling within their family with dysregulation, meltdowns, whatever term we prefer to use, in themselves, in the family dynamic, or just in their kiddo, what is the first thing that you would want parents to think about doing before one happens?
Yeah. So, let me just give you a little background. What I have been noticing at astronomical levels is so many parents, that's the big concern, is how do we handle meltdowns? How can we handle, this volatile situation in my house? It's happening. I'm frustrated. I'm tired. How can we fix this? And, of course, there's no easy fix, right? But one of the things I like to think about, right? It's very hard. And I think as a parent too, like, you love your child. You don't want to see them struggling and suffering like this. Like, yes. Sometimes they act like the world is caving in. It's really not easy. But so a couple of things on that note is the fact that, like, our brains can't differentiate stress. So that's why anxiety is such a real struggle for people, because that's the threat of stress, or the thought that something could be happening. What if, right? But that is perceived in the brain the exact same way a real threat is perceived. So if we're talking about a child who's left alone in their pain, doesn't have a secure attachment relationship with an adult of any kind, and a child who's in a grocery store frustrated that they're not getting their favorite snack, the brain is seeing that as exactly the same. It's stress. Stress is stress. And so what happens is our amygdala begins firing. I like to tell parents a lot of times it's like the Wi-Fi going down in their home. Like, you have your emotional brain and you have your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking brain. And there's a divide. They go offline. So they can start. Typically what happens is they stop communicating, essentially. There's no communication between the two of those. And the struggle is the reason why our emotional brain is so vulnerable in early childhood is because our prefrontal cortex hasn't fully developed, right? So that's starting to develop. That doesn't fully develop till like 30 years old. But what's happening is that all of our actions are driven by the limbic system, or the emotional brain. And I think it's really important for parents to understand, what is the emotional age of my child when I'm setting expectations? It's very easy for us to be frustrated and, throw an expectation or throw a consequence out there. But typically what I like to say, and this comes from Russell Barkley, who's like an amazing expert in ADHD, he always says the 30% rule, which is your child's executive function age is 30% behind what their actual age is. So keep that in mind. I think that's an important thing. I think it's important for us to understand how the amygdala can fire and perceive a threat of stress, no matter what the reason is for this meltdown. That's an important piece. So those are two really important things that I like people to think about prior to, really understanding, okay, now how do we handle this meltdown?
Right. And we should emphasize too that the things we're touching on today is sort of across the ages. So even though we're using the word meltdown, we're not just talking about toddlers. Of course, we are talking about older kiddos as well. Yeah. And what was the other thing I was going to say to emphasize? Oh, obviously all of us can struggle with emotional regulation, but is it true? I mean, I know the answer is yes, but did you want to touch on it's more common with kids with ADHD or just executive functioning challenges?
Yeah, so that's like a huge question that we don't really have all that much time to talk about, but most definitely. So ADHD, what we know neurologically about the ADHD brain is that emotions are felt stronger. We combine that emotions being felt stronger. I mean, listen, when an ADHD student loves you, they love you. They love you. But when they're like struggling like that, when they're having a meltdown, they're extremely angry, they're extremely frustrated. So I always try to tell parents, like, hone in on the good things, right? Because there's amazing strengths that are attached to an ADHD or that has those really intense feelings. But you combine that with the black and white thinking, or like that inflexible thinking, which leaks back to their cognitive flexibility struggles. And that is at the core root of students with ADHD. It's very normal for toddlers, preschool age, even maybe some early elementary students to have meltdowns and to really be frustrated easily. But that tends to kind of work itself out on its own when students aren't, having neurodevelopmental challenges. So why do we have a 16-year-old with ADHD who still has meltdowns? Because that's just part of their brain chemistry.
Right.
Can they learn skills to work with this? Absolutely. But at the core root, and the reason why I'm here right now, is because parents need to be teaching this in the home.
Right. And I didn't personally, we just got our ADHD diagnosis and my son just turned 13. I didn't realize the connection between those two things. I thought his lack of emotional regulation was something else. I didn't know what it was. I think of impulsivity, hyperactivity, lack of focus, fidgetiness, but I don't feel like there's always a lot of talk about this emotional piece, which is, of course, why I wanted to have you talk about it today. So thank you. I didn't say I was going to ask you that question in advance, but thank you. So we're kind of breaking this down to before, during, and after a meltdown or an episode. What is the main thing parents can think about doing before they're in the place of their child having a meltdown?
Yeah. Well, immediately before, if we're going to talk immediately before, we absolutely have to be thinking about, are their basic needs being met? Something that is so easily forgotten. Erica, you had mentioned earlier that it's so quick for us to deal with babies and toddlers and say, oh, they must be tired, they must be hungry. Well, guess what? A 10-year-old
have a checklist we run down, right?
Yeah. My 17-year-old is tired and hungry and takes his moods out on me daily. So I get it, really, I do. And,
right.
Not only are we trying to teach them how to figure that out and learn coping skills, but we need to be showing that, modeling that as well. So once we realize what is going on right before this meltdown, are their basic needs met? Not only sleep, hunger, which I'm going to tell you right now, sleeping has been sort of at the forefront of a lot of the struggles that I'm hearing from parents. I'm hearing this from teachers, that kids are falling asleep in classrooms. We really, as a society and as parents, need to get on top of this sleep situation. I can think about why that's probably happening, but at the end of the day, I don't think parents are saying, I really would rather my kids stay up all night on their cell phones, or I'd rather them, have trouble sleeping. The ADHD brain doesn't naturally settle. The circadian rhythms are different. Kids have more trouble staying asleep when they have ADHD, but we really, as a society, have to work to fix that, because that is a core reason why we can't regulate or self-regulate when we're hungry and tired. Illness. Actually, body temperature is another big one. If you're too hot or too cold, that can cause kids to really feel their emotions stronger. So finding the basic needs being met is number one. So the next thing that I like to talk about as far as finding triggers is we want to look at what we can observe basically happening before a meltdown. So again, how many times as a parent do we think, oh my gosh, my kid was normal 3 seconds ago and now they're freaking out? It's not usually how it works.
It is how it seems.
Yeah. And I think it's like, we have to understand those triggers and understanding what could be causing this. It's a big thing. So when I do my presentations to parents, I teach them about helping their child to learn how their body presents and how our body feels leading up to our brain then going offline. Because we often feel that, like, you and I, like when we feel anxiety or feel stressed, sometimes we feel hot. Maybe our stomachs start to bother us, but there's always going to be some, physical symptom that we feel leading up to that. Not something that we're going to be teaching our children in the heat of the moment, though. Right. So forget that for right now. But understanding those triggers, you're going to meet your child with more compassion and curiosity and better communication if you can learn to support that piece of it. Right. So over time, our goal really is that we want our kids to learn how to manage themselves and learn coping skills. So if we can observe what's going on beforehand, then we can then talk to them after the fact. And I'm going to jump really quickly to after the meltdown. Those things that we note, we can talk to them about it. We can ask open-ended questions to help them to problem solve on their own.
In a calmer moment.
In a calmer moment. I mean, I like to say that the younger the child, the less time is needed between that, because you're not going to talk to your 5-year-old 2 days later about
right.
their moment that they had at, the
Sure.
grocery store. But for teenagers, when something goes wrong or you get into a big argument with a teenager or even a preteen, you can talk 2 days later about that. So really it boils down to, it doesn't matter the age. It matters what you know about your child. Some children are ready to talk an hour later. And some children, I notice this is, I'm going to generalize for a second, but I notice that teenage boys need a little more time to discuss their feelings, if at all, if they even ever want to discuss their feelings.
Right.
So I know, like I have 3 children myself, and I know each one of them was very different about how they wanted to talk to me after a moment. As far as time frame.
I know my son talks better in motion. We got to go for a walk or go for a drive. I'm in the front, maybe he's in the back, or something where we're not like, hey, let's sit down and talk face to face right now.
Yeah, exactly.
At bedtime, of course, he wants to talk about everything at bedtime. That's probably a stall tactic.
Yeah, no, for sure. But you know what? As a parent, I think we have to pick our battles. And I always say, like, this is something that I heard years ago at one of my ADHD seminars that I attended. And what this doctor said was, you want to be thinking as a parent about putting attention to the behaviors that will keep your child from being a 25-year-old functioning member of society. Now, if your child wants to talk to you at bedtime about how they're feeling, give them that attention, because that's not going to affect how they are in 15 years from now.
Right.
Pick your battles. If they really want chocolate cake at 8:00 at night, and you know that that's going to cause a serious problem in your house if you say no, is that going to affect them 15 years down the road?
That's a really good question to ask yourself.
Isn't that? Yeah. I mean, I just always like that sort of theory and I used it myself as a parent, because I'm like, we realize at the end of the day, what are our non-negotiables and how can we negotiate better to just kind of pick our battle?
That's great. All right. So first we have be an observer, try to observe the triggers, go down the checklist of, what is the acronym? HALT, hungry, help me out, angry, lonely, tired, something like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't use the acronym, but that's a great idea. I mean, yeah, for sure.
It's something like that, but check those things. And then, did anything occur, before that? And is there any commonalities ahead of meltdowns? Okay. And then, so let's say we didn't observe any behaviors, were just not there yet, any triggers. And it's a situation of, my child was fine 3 seconds ago, now they're having a full-blown meltdown. How do we communicate with them, or how do we not communicate with them in the moment of the meltdown?
Yeah, well, just to go back for 1 second with the whole the observation piece is, your child might have not even been in your home or in your presence right before it.
Right.
So one thing that I've seen this, I've heard parents, when I really kind of help parents to break this down step by step, like, well, what was happening right before? Well, my child came in and freaked out and ran up the bedroom door and slammed the door shut and won't talk to me, and we have no idea what's going on. But then when you talk about it with your child later, you find out that she was left out with her group of friends, or she might have gotten into a fight with one of her friends. So really, what was that observation was, well, she was with her friends right before, so maybe that could have been causing it. Another thing that I really see, and I think that this deserves some relevance, is we have children who sit down to do their homework. We know homework is like we could talk for 6 hours about how to help homework in the moment, right? Tons of meltdowns revolve around homework. So Johnny can do his math homework like a champ, but then it's time to sit and do his reading homework, and he melts down. We're going to get frustrated, right? Because they were just doing their math homework fine. But what is that telling us about our child? So I really, an interesting quote that I recently, I'm not going to quote it directly because I don't have access to it, but what I think is important is that parents often think, how do I get rid of this behavior? But instead, how about if we reframe that and think, what is this behavior telling me about my child? Maybe they're struggling with reading and that's why they can't do their reading homework on their own. Maybe they have no idea what they're supposed to do because their meds wore off in English class, or their teacher didn't give them, a visual. They just told them what the homework was. There's a lot of things that go on that, we really need to try to observe and think, break it down.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, sorry, I skipped that question, how we could be better observers, but you brought me back there.
I think that's an important thing to remember, because we can think we're observing, but are we really observing?
Right, exactly. And what is the behavior telling us, instead of how do we fix it or stop it? Okay, so let's say we thought we were such a great observer. We did or did not see a trigger, but here we are, full-blown meltdown. What can parents do? Is there anything they should not do in the heat of the moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things. You're not going to teach your child in the heat of the moment. I can tell you that. The number one thing, and I'm sure that a lot of this, the parenting, sort of the gentle parenting that you're hearing, and the collaborative problem solving parenting programs often have been talking more about validation in the moment as a way to help with regulation. So the whole idea of validation is noting your child's feelings. So how do you do that?
Whether you agree with them or not.
Whether you agree or not, most definitely, they need to be felt heard. They need to be understood. I say this to teachers. I worked in a school for 18 years. I say this to teachers. At the end of the day, if children don't feel understood and accepted, you cannot teach them. They will not learn from you. The same thing goes for the household, right? Of course, you like to think as a parent, support them. But if your kid's having a meltdown and you say, you're okay, calm down, that's not validating, right? So how can we validate? We can use more like declarative language where we say, I understand how you're feeling. You must really be frustrated that you didn't get the grade on this test that you wanted to. And as soon as you kind of meet them with that sort of validation, letting them feel heard, they'll usually tend to kind of just like calm down a little bit. Might not be crazy, but a little bit, right? And once they learn that they're going to be understood and accepted with these future meltdowns, the meltdowns tend to last a lot less. And I've seen this with a lot of the parents that I coach where we've gone back and like reflected on this. Validation is number one. It doesn't matter. I would even think, let's try to validate as much as we can, even when there isn't a meltdown. Just when your child's upset, just help them to understand that you get it. Even maybe sharing your own personal experiences is really an important piece too. The second thing that I like to roll out to a lot of families is the idea of co-regulation, which co-regulation is a little bit something that it's more of a buzzword, I think, lately, but we haven't really learned how to actually do it. But what it basically is, and I'm going to dive into this just a little bit more after I tell you the other thing that I want to talk about, but it's the idea of like meeting your person that you're dealing with a calm voice. We have mirror neurons in our brain. It's the same mirror neurons that when we watch a really sad movie, we can sometimes cry, right? It's that sort of same thing. So if your child is freaking out and you use the same tone that they're using, what's going to happen? What's the environment going to feel like? But what you want to think about is, what kind of tone do I wish my child had right now while they're flipping out? Use that tone. And that's hard. I think it's hard for parents.
Sure, easier said than done.
Right. But it's one thing I like to teach my parents tough love sometimes is we have a responsibility as parents to learn this and to work on this, because we're the adults and we need to help our children in the long run. So if we can figure out a way to be calm, if that means we walk away for a second and take a deep breath and then come back with the calming voice. Should we have our arms crossed? Should we be not making eye contact with our child? Should we be on our cell phone? Like, we need to make eye contact. Again, going back to validation, comfort them, make them feel warm, make them feel safe. That's co-regulation. Now, I did have in my last presentation, I had a parent say, well, my child is like, get away from me if I'm upset.
I was just going to say that.
There are a lot of children that do not want to be comforted. You know your child best. So I don't want to jump too far ahead, but then there's that idea of what kind of conversation should happen after the meltdown, so we can develop expectations and communication when things are calm, so we can learn this. So what I had told this particular parent was, have a conversation with your child and say, I understand that when you're really upset, you don't want me to hug you. You want, so where can you go in our house that's a calm space that feels good, where you can go calm yourself down? And then what's the cue that you can give me that lets me know that you're ready for a hug? Because what typically will happen is that your child will not want the hug in the moment, and then they'll come back to you an hour later and go, but why didn't you hug me?
Right.
So put the onus on the child, give the child that autonomy to control. Again, we want to teach boundaries, right? We don't want our child to want to be, or to feel like they have to be touched if they don't want to be touched, for a whole other plethora of reasons. So let them decide when they're ready to be hugged. And it could be a very calm, cue that happens. Maybe that child gets up from their spot and comes up to mom and says, hug now. It could be something real simple, but figure it out between the two of you, how that is going to roll out. And I'm also a huge fan of creating a calm space in your home. Maybe it's a beanbag. Maybe it's essential oils or, just a calming spot that they can go to. Yeah. If they're not the type of person, because as they get older, they're not going to maybe want you to constantly hug them when they're upset. It's great for toddlers and preschoolers and some teens. Yeah, but only if they want it. Only if they want it and initiate it. Exactly. But that is what the co-regulation is. I mean, normally kids do want that sort of, they want to feel safe. Like letting them borrow your calm until they can get back to their own calm place. Yep. If they want it, if they're ready to borrow it. Exactly. But you're making it available. You're making it available. But at the end of the day, if you have a calm space in your home for them to go to, they're learning a coping mechanism. Right. And I have one of those, don't hug me in the moment. Don't try to make it better. I'll often say like, all right, I'll be on the couch when you're ready to come find me, or like, all right, I'm just going to sit here. Just want to sit here and hang out. So sort of separating the in the moment versus the after. If you have the don't try to help me kiddo, you might just be a calm presence, or let them know where to find you. Remind them you'll be there when they're ready. Is that appropriate? Yeah, I think that's great. But I also think that we cannot forget the idea that that should be discussed beforehand. Right. When things are better to have a plan heading into it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And listen, when their emotional brain and their thinking brain is offline, it's possible they forget about that. I deal with a lot of families that say, we have all these strategies and they don't know how to use them in the moment. Well, no, you're right. I don't know how to use my strategies in the moment sometimes either. But noting when they do, noting the littlest thing when they do go right to their comm center, or they do come back to you, going back to praising them. That gives back that validation too, but praising every little thing that they do when you do see them doing the behaviors that you want. I always say the behaviors that will get bigger. The things that you want to see will get bigger when you put attention to it. Right. Okay. So far we've got observe before it happens, or reflect later to try to catch it for next time. Then in the moment, we want to validate, but not try to teach. The moment for teaching is either before or after. Anything else in the moment before we go on, touch a little bit on the after part? Yeah. So like I said, validation, co-regulation. And then the other idea, which is super simple, is just less is more. So I'll go back to ADHD brains. They feed off attention, negative or positive. Okay. That's just how it works. If you have a child that is having a meltdown and is very frustrated, and you're doing a lot of talking, and you're trying to lecture, or you're trying to make sense, they are going to feed off of that, and it's going to escalate the situation. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not going to happen for other students that are neurodivergent, but I do know with the ADHD brain, they are going to feed off negative attention the same way that they're going to feed off positive attention. So why not give the positive when you can? So what I suggest is, when you start seeing them freak out or having, a moment, calm, less is more. So the communication needs to be extremely clear and concise. If you have the child that allows you to come in and let you be, comfort them, then what you want to do is you want to say, I'm so sorry that you're feeling frustrated right now. Would you like a hug? If they say no, where would you like to go and sit down on the couch until you're calm? But something very, it's that very calm voice. And as parents, it is not easy to do this. So practice it with your partner if you have an opportunity to do that, or practice it with another trusted adult. So you can, again, parents need to practice things too and practice skills. So, but doing that ahead of time is really going to help you then go, okay, it's happening right now. Let me practice that new skill I just learned. So I think that's something too, like less is always going to be more, less talk. All right. Validate, co-regulate, less is more. We're not going to spend too much time on after, because I do want to keep this short and sweet, but what's one thing parents can do after? And then we'll let families know how they can do a deeper dive into that if they want to. Yeah. So, clearly talking when things are calmer is always going to be important. So whether your child's really, really upset over, again, they're having to do their reading homework, and that turns into a huge meltdown, talking about that to them the next day or before bed gets them to do one thing: self-reflect. They learn during self-reflection, right? It gets them to kind of share when things are calm, how they were actually feeling, And then it helps you to kind of come up with an idea to problem solve if this happens again. Because we grow skills. So another thing,
probably when it happens again.
It's gonna happen again. The goal really is that the longer meltdowns are shorter, shorter, shorter. And then as they become shorter, at the end of the day, as parents, what do we want? We want them to self-manage their own behaviors.
Right.
We're not always going to be there to help them. So we have to teach them, going back to executive functions, we don't want to do things for our children that they can do for themselves, right? But if they don't have a skill, I'm going to assume that every student that struggles with regulation doesn't have the skill to do it yet.
Sure.
So until they gain that skill, we can't expect them to do these things for themselves. So really talking and self-reflecting when things are calmer is always going to be helpful. And then the other idea, which it's a little bit deeper, I could sit here and talk for a long time, is the idea of doing things like family meetings and discussing expectations. If you're really frustrated when it's time to sit and do your homework, how can we make homework better for you? That's a really great question to ask because it's causing them to think and it's giving them ownership of their own actions, right? And at the end of the day, we want our kids to always know that feelings are always, always, always okay. Actions are not. So yeah. I'll end on that as far as like the
I know we all have so much. We have so much more. I want to ask you so much more you want to share. But here's the good news for parents. You're going to do a deeper dive into a lot of this on Wednesday, April 26th at 7:30. So my advice to families would be that they go follow you in all the places. Again, Nicole's business is Igniting Your Mind. She has a great Instagram and Facebook page, also a website. So they can come join you for that live session. Also, you have some digital resources that are available for parents so they can reach out and request those. I know we all learn differently, so maybe they need to see it on paper. And you have a support group that parents can join where you give some free advice. So if you feel like you need help between now and the upcoming longer session, definitely go check out the support group. Did you want to share your
yeah, I can share. So I have, this is my Facebook page that I have here, Igniting Your Mind. And you can actually go right to, I believe this is how we get to it, right? We go to groups. And this is my group here. So it's just executive function support for parents. And what this has grown into is, I'll create a post on my Igniting Your Mind site that might be about something like emotional regulation. And then inside my group here, I will then post a deeper dive into it. I'll give parents strategies. So, I'm giving out this great information that you can then use and you can reach out to me. But a lot of it is all complimentary resources just to build awareness, to support people. I think that we're in a situation right now where we need more support for our parents than ever. No parents became parents knowing how to teach executive function skills. And sadly, that is
even what they were.
Yeah, or what they are. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I would love to do an awareness of like, what are executive functions? How can we build those in the home? If there's some, feedback for something like that, I would be more than happy to do something like that too. Awesome. So that's that. So feel free to join the support group. It's a little bit more detailed, right? Yep. And then I can just share let me just go back here. I did have my website here somewhere. That I was going to share.
So many tabs.
I know. I tell my students when I work with them, how many tabs do you keep open? Why do you keep so many? And then here I have like 10.
I know, which is what my brain looks like too.
Yeah. So here is my website. I'll give you just a quick overview. I do list all the services that I have here. And my resources page really is kind of where it's at. I talk about that. So these are all like complimentary resources that I have. And for my students and my clients that I work with students from middle school up until like young adulthood in college. I have a lot of stuff here that links to articles that I think are good and, peer-reviewed articles and things for parents to learn more. And then I have a lot for teachers because I was a teacher for 18 years and I know how much support they need. Just like our parents need support.
Sure, absolutely.
Are really struggling.
Especially now.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, and then I have a link to a blog, so I do blogs here. as much as possible to
Awesome,
really help
right?
out. Yeah. So
In all of our free time. All right,
yeah.
excellent. Well, thank you for showing us around and letting families know where they can find you. Of course, you can also find Nicole on our directory at specialneedscollective.com. She's one of our featured businesses. And we're so appreciative of your knowledge and the time and the expertise that you share with families. So thank you for joining me. And we will come back and dive into this topic more or do a different topic very soon.
Excellent.
All
Thanks, guys.
right. Thank you.